Tonight, fresh confirmation that U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods are mere days away.
Talking to the president directly, February 1st is still on the books.
We'll look at Canadian preparations at all levels. On foreign interference, a mixed report card. Parliament has no traitors, but the government had weak communication.
The government sometimes took too long to act, and coordination was not always optimal.
And from Texas to BC, the community costs of the fracking boom.
I felt a shaking. I thought, okay, where are they fracking now that we haven't been notified about?
The uphill fight for residents when a big business rumbles into town.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thank you for joining us. We're now just 4 days out from Donald Trump's tariff threat deadline. And with that date approaching, more signs he is pushing forward. In front of a packed gallery, new White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt reiterated to reporters today, February 1st still holds. Back in Canada, new insight into the Liberals' plan to respond with a massive aid package for the hardest hit Canadians, and an indication those measures could get the support of the NDP leader. Kate McKenna now with what it would take to make that plan a reality and the continued efforts to avoid those tariffs altogether.
Let's give this a whirl.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford is driving home the message Canada is not for sale.
I can't stress enough how devastating these tariffs will be on Ontario families, on Ontario workers.
Good afternoon, everybody.
The latest signal from the White House is that Donald Trump's not backing down from his threat to slap Canadian goods with massive tariffs starting this weekend.
As far as I'm still tracking, and that was last night talking to the president directly, February 1st is still on the books.
More than 2 million Canadian jobs are tied to trade with the U.S. Politicians and business leaders are bracing for impact.
If a significant tariff is imposed, it'll bring the industry to its knees. That's the bottom line.
Canadian officials have been trying to dissuade the Trump administration for months, but there are challenges.
A lot of President Trump's nominees have not been confirmed, and there is legislation that requires them to be confirmed before they can actually engage formally with other governments.
For now, sources say the federal government is readying a multi-billion-dollar bailout.
People should get ready for a bit of a bumpy ride. We will need to provide assistance either to businesses or to workers.
It's a move that could offer reprieve for those individuals and perhaps also the minority Liberal government.
There are hundreds and thousands of Canadian jobs at risk.
Opposition leaders have said they want to topple the government, but now the NDP leader says he's open to supporting the Liberals to pass financial aid, even if it means delaying an election.
If there is any desire to move forward, the government should call us together, like we did during COVID, and discuss a plan that supports workers.
Some premiers also say they'll work with Ottawa.
It's not about one level of government. It's about all three levels of government working collaboratively.
We're going to work to make sure that the federal government keeps to those commitments, that they treat this as seriously as they did the COVID response.
But all of this depends on what Donald Trump actually does on Saturday, if anything. It's unclear whether there will be carve-outs or whether tariffs will start small and then get bigger over time. That's something only he seems to know for sure.
And Kate, the premiers met today to talk about the tariff threat, obviously, but what came out of that?
They've been meeting weekly now and are set to meet with the Prime Minister again on Wednesday. A source says they spoke about their plan to travel together to Washington in mid-February, and they also touched on what a federal bailout package could look like, though I'm told nothing formal has been presented to the provinces yet.
All right, Kate McKenna in Ottawa tonight. Thanks, Kate.
You're welcome.
A cloud of suspicion that's hung over Parliament Hill for months now may be lifting. The final report into foreign election interference says there's no evidence MPs have been plotting against Canada. But as Ashley Burke explains, the commissioner did find some problems.
A public inquiry now dispelling a serious allegation that for months has caused concern on Parliament Hill.
The evidence does not show any MPs plotting with foreign states against Canada's interests.
Commissioner Marie-Josée Augue says after all the top secret intelligence she's seen, she doesn't see cause for widespread alarm.
Nor have I seen any evidence to suggest that there are currently so-called traitors in Parliament.
Back in June, a committee of parliamentarians with top secret security clearance said intelligence suggested some of their colleagues had been compromised even knowingly by foreign states, including sharing confidential information with foreign intelligence officials. The NDP's leader had said he was convinced there were traitors.
We wanted the justice of the public inquiry to delve into these matters, to get the full details, to get more information, and that's what Justice Hogue did.
Hogue said she found real concerns about some parliamentarians having problematic relationships with foreign officials, showing bad judgment or acting naively.
Some may have benefited from the support of a foreign state, sometimes without knowing anything about it.
But she said the cases are few and the attempts largely ineffective.
She said in her report that she found no evidence of witting accomplices, no evidence of the practice of anything approaching treason. So she really did put this in, I think, important perspective.
David McGuinty chaired that June committee and is now the public safety minister.
She had access to different kinds of intelligence. She had more time to scrutinize some of it.
The commissioner concluded the Trudeau government's handling of foreign meddling was far from perfect, and the Conservatives are now accusing the government of failing to protect Canadian democracy.
And actually, it really does seem that she did have a lot to say about just how the government dealt with all of this.
Yeah, Adrian, she said at times Ottawa reacted too slowly to foreign interference attempt, that intelligence sometimes failed to reach senior decision makers, including the Prime Minister. The commissioner also called the government a poor communicator and said it should have been a lot more transparent with the public, who learned about foreign interference through leaks in the media. Now, there are more than 50 recommendations in this report and a final warning. The commissioner said that foreign actors are using sophisticated technology to sow disinformation, calling that the biggest threat to our democracy.
All right, Ashley Burke in Ottawa. The Prime Minister issued a warning in Poland about the rise of anti-Semitism, extremism, and hatred, and he did that following the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz.
For all human beings must be alert and protect themselves against messages that divide, messages that convince people to think of someone who is different as other or less.
He was speaking alongside Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk. The two also signed a new agreement that will allow Canadian companies to help support Poland's plans to generate nuclear power. Well, a growing number of people are being detained in the U.S. It's all part of the new administration's crackdown on undocumented migrants. Tonight, Paul Hunter shows us some of the latest arrests, this time in America's biggest city.
As if to underline, the Trump administration wants people to see these pictures of an arrest in New York City of an undocumented migrant posted online by the new Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, who added her own video statement.
We're in New York City this morning. We are getting the dirt bags off these streets.
We're getting the dirt bags off these streets, she said. It's a scene playing out across the U.S. Federal officers carrying out what President Donald Trump has pledged will be the biggest mass deportation in U.S. history. The immediate goal, he said, criminals. And while the raids have broad support in many parts of this country, some worry it's not just criminals being deported.
Yo voté por él.
I voted for him, said this woman in New York, because he's a businessman who cares about our well-being. But we are not all delinquents.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are we?
At the White House, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt emphasized all undocumented migrants are now seen as criminals.
All of them, because they illegally broke our nation's laws and therefore they are criminals as far as this administration goes.
But even with the U.S. military now reinforcing the wall that fortifies parts of the U.S.-Mexico border, it's clear there are hurdles for Trump's plans. In Chicago, a so-called sanctuary city, which promises shelter and protection for migrants in need, pushback.
We stand together firmly in our welcoming city status, as well as our commitment to protecting all residents of the city of Chicago, no matter where you come from or how long you've lived here.
But for now, Adrian, the raids continue.
I suppose, meanwhile, Paul, the United States was spinning over yet another directive from Donald Trump.
Yeah, and one with serious implications for all kinds of organizations here, schools, local governments, nonprofit agencies. Here's what happened. The White House issued a memo freezing all federal aid funding across the board. We're talking possibly trillions of dollars worth of loans and grant money frozen, just like that. Then there's to be an assessment of each group that normally gets the money so as to verify that they're complying with Trump's executive orders, for example, on ending diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. They'd have to prove they're ending them. For clarity on what it all means, it was put to White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Here's part of her answer.
It means no more funding for illegal DEI programs. It means no more funding for the Green New scam that has cost American taxpayers tens of billions of dollars. It means no more funding for transgenderism and wokeness across our federal bureaucracy.
Now, it's important to note, Adrian, those are all the kinds of things Trump campaigned on, and people voted him in part to do stuff like this, to reshape the U.S. government. Democrats and others, meanwhile, called the freeze illegal, reckless, and dangerous, and potentially hurting people in need, many of whom, by the way, would be among those who voted for Donald Trump in November. A bunch of states quickly sued to block the freeze, and this evening they want a reprieve, but only until next week.
All right, Paul Hunter in Washington tonight. And Google Maps will soon change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America. The change is in line with the Trump executive order. U.S. users will see the new name, but those in Mexico will still see the current one. Here in Canada and in the rest of the world, both will appear. Google says the change follows a long-standing practice in such cases. The company also says North America's tallest peak will be referred to by its former name. Barack Obama had ordered Mount McKinley to be renamed Denali. Here at home, Ontarians will head to the polls next month, more than a year before they have to. Doug Ford says a fresh mandate is needed in the face of looming tariffs. Lisa Shing on why the opposition isn't buying that.
After a visit to the Lieutenant Governor, it's now official. Doug Ford says Ontarians will go to the polls February 27th, as he and his ministers were already in campaign mode.
I'm the premier, and I'm going to work hard, which I have been, 18 hours a day.
An op-ed in a national newspaper, appearances with Indigenous leaders, announcements to develop electric vehicle technology.
Which is why our government is proud to support this expansion with a further $100 million investment.
The Progressive Conservatives have already promised more than $1 billion to get every Ontarian a family doctor within 4 years. More than 2 million currently don't have one, something their opponents have pointed out.
Ontarians are going to see through this.
Opposition leaders did not have any official appearances, but are slamming the snap election.
It's going to cost Ontarians almost $200 million to hold an early election, so nobody wants this.
In a statement, Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie said the PCs are wasting money instead of using it to fix our broken healthcare system and make your life more affordable. Despite more than a year left with a large majority, Ford has repeatedly said he wants a mandate to spend billions in order to counter Donald Trump's threatened tariffs.
This is going to be a battle for the next 4 years.
And with his party leading in the polls, the timing makes sense, according to analysts.
Given that there is the option to go to an election now, when things are somewhat stable and understood and known, it's a much more advantageous time for the current government.
Things might not be so stable more than a year from now if Trump levies those tariffs and Ontarians are suffering as a result. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
Deep fear and violence are gripping the largest city in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Goma sits right up against the border with Rwanda, and rebels backed by that country say they have now captured it. As Margaret Evans shows us, inside the city, there is death and suffering and desperation, and outside, anger aimed at Rwanda.
Central Goma and a neighborhood emptied, save for the sound of heavy gunfire and armed men on the move. Fighters from the Rwandan-backed rebel group known as M23 captured on social media. They claim to control all of Goma, but witnesses on the ground say pockets of Congolese troops are still fighting.
The rebel groups.
Doctors Without Borders, Natalia Tarrant, spoke to us via satellite phone.
Things are not getting better. Some of the people, they have already run out of the stock of food in the houses. The shops has been closed for 3 days.
Looting has spread along with the chaos. Foreign truck drivers making it across the border into Rwanda said they hid under their trucks for 2 days. We saw and heard terrible things, says Alwa Emmanuel. Dead bodies, gunshots, bombs. Conflicts between rival militias in DRC's mineral-rich east have raged for decades, displacing hundreds of thousands. M23 rebels briefly took Goma once before, in 2012, but pulled back after international donors threatened to withhold aid from Rwanda. It denies supporting the group, despite being called out by countries including Britain.
We know that M23 rebels could not have taken Goma without material support from Rwandan defense forces.
And from what I'm hearing, people increasingly feel that this is a de facto annexation.
Regional expert Michaela Rong says it will take more than words to stop Rwanda's president, Paul Kagame.
There's a really stark, staring, glaring difference between what the international community did in 2012 and what it's done now.
And there have been angry protests in the Congolese capital, Kinshasa. Crowds attacking diplomatic missions of countries they accuse of backing Rwanda at their expense. Margaret Evans, CBC News, London.
Even as fires still burn in the Los Angeles area, a new report tonight on how much climate change fueled those flames.
Peak January fire weather this extreme is about 35% more likely to occur in the current climate.
Why experts say we can expect more disasters like it next. Plus, a staple of rural communities closing its doors.
It'll be a big change. We're going to miss it for sure.
Where will customers turn after PV Mart? And later, a breathtaking performance against an icy backdrop.
There's a sense of wonder, but there's also a sense of admiration and respect.
The ballerina who danced on the bow of a ship in Antarctica. We're back in 2. And that was the frantic scene at a South Korean airport tonight. Crews rushed to put out a fire on an Air Busan plane. It happened just before it was supposed to take off for Hong Kong. All passengers and crew managed to get out, though at least 7 had minor injuries. It's been barely a month since 179 people died in a crash landing at another South Korean airport, the country's deadliest air disaster. And at least 2 people are in critical condition in Montreal tonight after a large fire destroyed an apartment building. Officials say a man and woman, both in their 70s, suffered serious burns, and 3 others, including a firefighter, were treated for smoke inhalation. More than 50 trucks responded to the fire that damaged multiple units, and officials say the cause is under investigation. Well, a new study on this month's deadly LA fires confirms the impact of climate change and shows why it makes more fires more likely. Anand Ram now on residents squeezed between 2 gigantic industries, insurance and oil and gas.
The rains were sorely needed in Pasadena, but reveal the scars of what happened just a few weeks ago. Now, a new rapid analysis suggests these scenes might repeat themselves.
Peak January fire weather this extreme is about 35% more likely to occur in the current climate.
Climate change intensified the hot and dry conditions, turning vegetation into fuel. And then heavy winds helped the fires go where they normally don't.
This is my home. And my home is gone.
But even as Californians wait to see if they have pieces to pick up, experts say the climate crisis is stressing an industry responsible for helping them, insurance.
Rates have gone up dramatically,
and insurers are declining to renew insurance or write new insurance.
With insured losses of these fires estimated at more than $30 billion, premiums are likely to spike for everyone, triggering a potential domino effect.
We're starting to see some evidence that folks are defaulting on their mortgage, not just in California, but elsewhere in the United States, as these insurance prices go up.
We are all paying for these disasters, but there is one stakeholder that is not paying.
One California bill introduced this week seeks to let insurers and homeowners sue oil and gas companies as the burning of fossil fuels continues to drive global heating. The industry called it theatrics and scapegoating. But with the science pointing to a more uninsurable future, experts say the money has to come from somewhere. Anand Ram, CBC News, Toronto.
Farm goods store Peavey Mart announced today it is closing all of its stores across Canada.
I'm so sad they're closing. It's the best store.
What now for communities that counted on it? Plus, fracking for oil and gas is making the earth shake.
We were sitting on the couch and everything started shaking.
Susan Ormiston looks at the growing concern in Texas and right here at home.
What people don't realize is that there's a human cost to this.
And the online scam hidden behind some fake news headlines. Nora Young traces a global web of deception. The National breaks down stories shaping our world. Next. Do you remember all those drones spotted flying over New Jersey last month? They sparked worry and more than a few conspiracy theories. Well, the U.S. government now says they were authorized to be there for research and various other reasons. The quote from the White House today, this was not the enemy. Peavey Mart, a Canadian chain that specializes in all things farm-related, says it is shutting down all 90 of its stores. Alexander Silberman now with how the company got to this point and the gap this will create in many rural communities.
At Peavey Mart stores across Canada, shoppers headed in to find a bargain, met by signs announcing the retail chain's looming closure.
Jeez, disappointing. It'll be a big change. We're going to miss it for sure.
Late last week, the Alberta-based company first announced plans to restructure, shutting down nearly 24 stores in Ontario and Nova Scotia. Then on Monday night, Peavey Industries LP, the chain's owner, told shoppers it would be shutting down nationwide, with some closures beginning immediately. In a statement, the company says it faced unprecedented challenges, citing record low consumer confidence, inflation, and rising costs. Though some say the mid-sized chain may have expanded too fast at a time in which it faced tough competition.
Brick and mortar is a hard game right now, no matter who you are. But if you have something that can be replicated online in cheaper, I think it's really tough.
Peavey Mart had 90 locations across the country. Its origins date back to the 60s, and it's been Canadian-owned since 1975.
I'm so sad they're closing. It's the best store.
Rural shoppers like Melanie Roth depend on the store for a range of specialty supplies, clothing for farming and gardening, fencing, even live chickens. A unique farm focus few retailers offer.
This store brings community. I love this store. And, you know, I don't mind going to Walmart and things like that, but I love going to places. This is what keeps a small town together.
Fans of Peavey Mart say the store was an essential service for many rural communities, making it easy to quickly pick up everything from a bag of horse feed to a piece of farm equipment. And when it closes its doors, many say their best alternative will now be to shop online. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Uxbridge, Ontario.
Now it's time to dig deeper into the stories shaping our world. An international scam using fake CBC articles to target Canadians on X. Our investigative team tracks down the source, but first.
We are at risk. It's well documented.
Oil fields triggering tremors and tension on both sides of the border.
We're seeing about 10 times as many earthquakes every year.
And more of them are strong enough to cause damage. International climate correspondent Susan Ormiston visited both oil-rich regions to drill down on the cause.
Everyone remembers the day the ground shook.
We were sitting on the couch and everything started shaking.
What did you think?
Immediately earthquake. Nothing else explained it.
Oh, it just shakes.
That was like the fourth one that happened, and it was pretty crazy.
The biggest was a magnitude 5.1 earthquake rumbling through Hermleigh in Scurry County, Texas.
They say like the oil field around here has caused it, but I don't know.
About 9:30 on the morning of July 26th, an earthquake sent tremors through this town in Texas, jostling walls and rattling picture frames. There'd been a lot recently, much smaller ones, over 60 in the previous 7 days in Scurry County. Nearby in Snyder, Jay Calloway was on duty as the city's emergency management coordinator.
When it was coming, it sounded like I heard a cattle coming. And then it was just an eerie feeling, and then it sounded like the cattle was leaving.
What was your first thought?
There's a big one. What I was getting reports of is cracks in the walls, cracks in mortar, concrete cracks in driveways, foundations was the main damage that we've got.
And what do you think about suggestions that it was caused by fracturing by?
I have people ask me that all the time. I cannot give an answer. I don't know. That's above my expertise.
Snyder is the capital of Scurry County, and it lies on the edge of the Permian Basin, one of the richest oil and gas fields in the U.S. Hydraulic fracturing methods have spawned jobs and profits, but also earthquakes, not natural to Texas. In fracking, operators drill vertically and then go horizontally for kilometers. A sludge of water, sand, and chemicals is injected at high pressure, fracturing the rock, releasing oil and gas. But if that mixture taps a vulnerable part, a fault, the rock can slide and cause a quake. Fracking uses huge volumes of water, which have to be disposed, often by re-injecting the water back underground, and that's been a source of many quakes.
You see that one? This is another earthquake.
Alexandros Savaitis, a seismologist, can see small quakes pop up real time, getting data relayed by solar-powered monitoring stations throughout Texas.
All these red circles are the highest magnitude seismicity.
There are a couple of hundred of earthquakes daily, most of them small, under magnitude 1.5. But the oil and gas industry was slow to admit, he says, that quakes were a byproduct.
When I came here in 2016, they were in denial. That was really not the best thing. I think the last 5 years, at least, it has been accepted by both the industry and the public. Our eyes on a daily basis are on the Midland Basin. Midland Basin is our key area. We think that this is the area we might see a few more magnitude 4 and above earthquakes.
Midland is at the heart of the Permian Basin, and horizontal fracking has unleashed another boom here. Deep in the oil patch, engineer Steve Meltzer meets us at the Petroleum Club of Midland.
I felt that one, and it's pretty far away, and it was 15 seconds of motion.
He's a second-generation oil man working as a consultant now. What does the general population think about earthquakes related to the oil and gas industry?
Well, they get nervous. The people get nervous. I get nervous, and so we're going to have to be careful about the water disposal issue near the urban areas.
Meltzer shows us the newest fracking pad right in the middle of Midland.
We didn't ever think we'd be doing drilling and fracking in town, but it's become a big deal.
They'll drill down, then go horizontally right under the city. But he's more worried about the byproduct, those huge volumes of used water that have to be disposed.
This would be a water injection well, often called a water disposal well.
So underneath here, when the water's going down, how is it disturbing the earth to cause an earthquake?
Well, the deep ones, if the water gets into one of those fractures or faults, then it lubricates that fault and creates the earthquake.
Do you think this summer created any kind of a tipping point?
Well, we're getting close to it. I think if we have another one, 5 or better, there's going to be a lot of ramifications.
And Texas isn't the only hotspot. This is Peace River country in northeastern BC, in the middle of one of Canada's richest gas deposits, the Montney Formation. More fracking here is leading to more earthquakes. And Richard Kabzims has a big worry. He's lived here in Farmington with his wife and family since 1990. He first felt the shake 4 years ago.
It felt like a truck was hitting the side of our house and the engine rumbling. So this deep, low rumbling and things would shift. It would wake you up, and especially the first few times, you didn't know what was happening. You didn't have any experience. And again, with earthquakes, you just don't know. When will they occur? These yellow dots are all of the residences.
Now fracking is coming closer. A new site just over 1 kilometer from his home and near about 50 homes in the subdivision.
We are at risk. It's well documented. We've sent them letters and they've still approved the permit. So we are bearing the risk and they are saying, don't worry.
Gas production is projected to boom in the Montney Formation to feed a new natural gas pipeline. Coastal GasLink, 12 years in the making, promises to pump over 2 billion cubic feet of natural gas a day for a new liquefied natural gas terminal in Kitimat, BC. LNG for export to Asia, a first.
This is the Montney Pier. The blue dots are magnitude 3 to 4 earthquakes. Magnitude 3 is about where you could start to see some minor damage, such as cracking of foundations.
Gail Atkinson, a foremost seismologist, shows how earthquakes at magnitude 3 and above are at record numbers.
In 2021, we jumped up to 60 earthquakes of magnitude 3 a year. Last year, up to about 160. Because we're seeing about 10 times as many earthquakes every year as we saw up to 2010, we'll be seeing 10 times as many at every magnitude.
Wow. So does that mean that we're more likely to see a 4 or 5?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right.
There's already been warnings. 6 years ago, a magnitude 4.6 quake shook a massive dam under construction on the Peace River. This is the Site C Dam in northeastern BC. Back in 2018, construction workers were told to evacuate the area after a strong tremor shook the land. Critics say that infrastructure like this should be protected by a bigger buffer zone.
It's my view that there should be a buffer zone of around 5 kilometers where you just don't frack around a dam. It's just not worth taking a risk with a major dam.
They're actively constructing it today.
Up on the hill, Ovintiv, the large oil and gas producer, is building the pad for 28 wells. Drilling is scheduled to start in early February.
When you imagine that there will be a drill tower significantly taller than the trees nearby on a hill above our house, and the trees will not provide us a screen from seismic activity.
And he can't get insurance for earthquake damage either. 9 of his neighbors have signed a protest letter addressed to the BC oil and gas regulator.
I believe it was beginning of November, and I felt a rumble. I felt a shaking. And I thought, okay, where are they fracking now that we haven't been notified about? Right?
When oil companies, whoever they deal with, whether it's a settlement or fixing something on your property, you have to sign a non-disclosure. So you're not supposed to talk to your neighbors about what's really going on. And I think that's part of the problem. They muzzle everybody.
Ovintiv, the gas company, says that there is no threat from these fracking wells. Do you accept that?
Absolutely not. It didn't happen before.
Richard Kabzums is not backing down. He's written 6 letters to Ovintiv, and in a letter back, the company said, instances of induced seismicity show these events occur deep underground. Numerous studies in Canada have concluded these events have no impact on health, safety, or the environment.
I would say that statement is patently false. There have been damaging earthquakes that have been induced at depths as little as 1 or 2 kilometers, which is very close to the surface.
Ovintiv declined our request for an interview. The BC Energy Regulator says safety measures include constant monitoring. Any seismic activity in this area at magnitude 3 or higher means the operator must suspend operations and investigate.
It's kind of like closing the barn after the first horse is left. If you have one of those cases where it just lights up right away and gives you a magnitude 4 or a 5 as its very first salvo, the traffic light won't work.
The homeowners are running out of options.
What people don't realize is that there's a human cost to this gas, and the people in the Bell subdivision are part of that human cost. We are bearing a risk. They see a reward, we see risk.
So, Susan, for those BC homeowners, what's next for them?
Well, Richard Kabzums, with some legal help, has appealed officially this permit, but the drilling starts next month and he's had no response. He did hear from his insurer, who said there's no coverage for earthquake damage.
Ouch. And in terms of the seismic events, as I understand it, a lot of them are at a very low level, so they're not even necessarily being felt. At what point does that become dangerous, though?
Well, it depends on magnitude and place. I mean, magnitude 3 can cause damage within 10 kilometers, and 4 is 10 times more severe, so 10 times more energy. And we're seeing 4s and 5s in Alberta and BC. So the question is, if it's near populations or infrastructure, this is where it becomes a real problem. We're talking about risk, Adrian. With the boom in production, are the regulators keeping up?
Okay, so many more questions to go. Susan Ormiston, thank you.
All right.
Coming up, a CBC investigation traces the path of some fake news headlines and the scam behind them. Plus, a daring dance on the icy waters of Antarctica. That's coming up. So these look like CBC News articles, but they're fake and they're hiding a scam. The scammers spoof businesses too, not just broadcasters.
And why us? Because, I mean, it's not like we have a lot of followers.
CBC's Nora Young follows the trail of the scam to an Ontario home and then overseas.
Someone is flooding X with these fake CBC stories, saying Pierre Polyev is being sued and Jagmeet Singh was arrested. And people are wondering what's going on. So we went down the rabbit hole and found an international scam targeting Canadians. Our search brought us to this house in Barrie, an unsuspecting business outside Houston, a server in the Netherlands, and a link to Russia. Here's how this scam really works. Take this example. Shocking fake news, all designed to draw you in. So we clicked on it. By the way, don't try this at home. We used special tools to stay safe. It takes you to a realistic looking news site. But look here. If you read the story, it's actually an ad for something called quantum AI. And if you click the link, it takes you to a realistic looking investment platform. It even tries to convince you it's not a scam. Red flag, am I right? Once you sign up, it takes you to a convincing trading site. And finally, it asks you to contact an account manager to deposit your investment. And that's when you lose all your money. The government of Australia warns that one man who fell for quantum AI lost $80,000. Police in Canada have also warned about the scam. So that's how it works. But who's behind it? This shows all the internet connections that fake CBC article makes around the world. Its IP address belongs to a Canadian internet provider registered at this house in Barrie, Ontario. The ISP, Velcom, told us they didn't know about the scam. They lease out their IP addresses to clients through another company, IPXO. We reached out and they did not get back to us. Now, if you stop there, you might think this website is Canadian. The scammers probably know that too. So let's keep going. The server hosting the site is really in the Netherlands. Until October, it was based near Moscow. And the server's domain still traces back to St. Petersburg. Does that mean the scammers are in Russia? We can't say for sure, because this scam is really sophisticated and just keeps evolving. These fake ads used to post from old crypto accounts on X. But this is a little bit different. Take this craft store from Texas. It's a real business. But this isn't their real X account. It's fake and brand new. We contacted these businesses, and those that responded said they had no idea this was happening.
And why us? Because, I mean, it's not like we have a lot of followers or we're famous or, you know, why do they have to steal somebody's real stuff?
So why are you seeing these ads everywhere on your feed? We reached out to X because they're making money from these ads, and they didn't respond.
So, Nora, there's been a lot of concern about artificial intelligence tools being used to manipulate voices or images. In the case of these scams, how much of a concern has that been?
Yeah, you're right that in general, the so-called deepfake technology is a big concern in these scams. But in this particular case, what we were looking at, what we really saw was just text articles, still images, and some not very sophisticated CBC branding around it. So not so sophisticated in the content creation part, really relying on old school scam techniques. So recognizable people, in this case politicians, the promise of easy money, and of course with social media, the ability to spread those messages at scale.
All right, sort of a classic approach. All right, Nora Young, thank you.
My pleasure, thank you.
Coming up, braving icy waters for a unique performance.
I think this moment was like a moment for us when we speak with everyone.
Antarctica, as you have never seen it before, that is next in our moment. This is absolutely not an image generated by AI. That is a real ballerina, Victoria d'Auberville, dancing amongst the ice floes off the coast of Antarctica. So perched on what's called the bulbous bow of their cruise ship, the performance was an exercise in risk versus reward. And tonight, the reward is our moment.
As Victoria and I are always looking to do new things, we met the second captain who told us that there was this unique place in front of the boat that he could take us to.
So we go with a Zodiac.
In the front of the boat.
It was like really cold and I was a little bit scared.
The ice started coming really in front of the boat, and that's when Victoria had to really feel when the right moment was coming.
It was just beautiful, and at this moment I understand like the role of the artist is to create a real story about the reality.
There's a sense of wonder, but there's also a sense of admiration and respect. It really talks about the fragility of the dance, but also at the same time the harshness and the brutality. So I think it's this beautiful contrast that makes this video so beautiful and unique.
Completely beautiful. And of course, lots of people, when they saw it, had lots of questions about how could you do that? That looks so dangerous. They did safety checks before the performance. They even did sort of a dry run on in a place called South Georgia, which is an island in the Atlantic between Chile and Antarctica, just to make sure it was possible. It was. That's a moment she will never forget. From all of us at the National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to the National's YouTube channel. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.